Hey friends, happy Friday, July 2nd. If you work regular work weeks, you might even get an extra day this weekend, so maybe a 3-day weekend. Rest, recreation, right? The goodness of God. We are not human doings, we are human beings. Many blessings to you. I'll give you a reflection. I invite you to read the readings for the day prayerfully. There's a link over on the sidebar, and then turn off the screen, spend a little bit of time in reflection and prayer in communion with our God. We have first reading from the book of Genesis, and we have the gospel. Gospel is the call of Matthew, the tax collector. One of the fun things to just sit with is this table fellowship of Jesus, right? Jesus who eats with tax collectors and prostitutes. It's a fascinating dynamic because this ministry of eating with people, with public sinners, is that Jesus is, again, living that teaching that they are all children of Abraham, and that the promises of Abraham are meant even for these public sinners, tax collectors and prostitutes. And the question that we don't know, some of them wind up following Jesus, leaving behind their old ways of life, and others of them don't. Others of them, perhaps because of economic circumstances, perhaps because of other sorts of realities, they probably continue in their work. And they might remember that day that weird rabbi ate with them and talked with them about God, and maybe there was a burning in their heart, but that they continued on in their way. We don't have any indication in the Gospels that Jesus threw down the gauntlet with any of these folks, right? Like the people that he fights with are the religious authorities. He doesn't seem to yell at the public sinners. And there's this constant tension within our tradition of the acceptance of God. God who knows us and loves us, but also God who calls us to conversion, calls us to deeper life. So I'll give you a little choose your own adventure place today, right? Like as we read of the call of Matthew, as we read of Jesus talking a bit about his ministry with those who are judged to be public sinners, where is the Lord inviting us just today? To that place of change, conversion, letting go, or that place of acceptance, of communion, of connection, of knowing that we are absolutely cherished, not because of what we do, but because of who God knows us to be and how God created us. All right, first reading. I would just point out the first reading, we have quite a bit of a cut and paste sort of a thing. We begin with the beginning of, I think, chapter 23 of Genesis, and then we kind of have different bits all the way through the end of chapter 24 in order to try to give us a narrative thread through some other sort of complicating stories in a bite-sized enough chunk that we can proclaim it publicly. If you'd like to read the full kind of story here about Isaac becoming established in the land, you recognize that Abraham is very concerned about his son Isaac not marrying a Canaanite. And this reflects definite preoccupations of, the ancestors of Jesus, our ancestors, of not intermarrying and not becoming like their neighbors. So that's being expressed here. What drew my attention is the question of this steward, this servant. What if the wife promised to your son refuses to come back here? Should I then marry him? Should I then take him back there? And Abraham is like, heaven forbid, God forbid, whatever you do, don't take my son back. I'll release you from this oath, but whatever you do, don't take him back. And I like here a bit of this deep awareness of the promise, right? That God has promised countless descendants and all sorts of blessing to the entire household. And at this point, literally he has one son, Isaac, who's not even married. But God has such faith that God is going to do great, prodigious things, that the last thing that he wants is for his son to go back to the place where he, Abraham, and Sarah were from. That he has to be there in the place of God's blessing. And we, because we've been dispersed from this, we don't appreciate it. but to remember that the promises of God to the patriarchs was there, and it was land, and it was security, and it was protection, and it was the blessing of God there. So again, a little bit of that idea of not going back, right? That conversion, new life sort of stuff, but it might also be the dreams, thinking about the promises of God, thinking about the deep yearning of our heart. That yearning, frankly, that can only be satisfied fully in eternity. But the yearning that we have for abundance, and for the abundance that comes from God, being in this place and having what God has promised. So maybe a little bit of that Abraham and Isaac and servant narrative might stir something there. All right. Well, happy Friday. May you find things to pray with and to rest with in the course of these scriptures as well. Link on the sidebar, prayerfully read the readings, turn off the screen, spend some time with the Lord. Happy Friday. May God continue to bless us as a people, continue to bless all who are struggling in life. Take care.